Welcome to ParadoxWalk podcast, specializing in paranormal activity, UFOs, cryptids, glitch in the matrix stories, anything completely weird, completely out of the ordinary. It is April 13th of the year 2023. This is episode 27. I've been wanting to do an episode on etymology for a long time. I think I found some interesting connections in words. I think words are important, and I was really happy to be able to finally find a big part of what I was looking for. Etymology is the study of where words came from, like their original meaning or basically their origins. Some of these I found are my opinion. Some of the connections seem to kind of straddle both English and Latin languages. And some of these are actually things I've looked up from professional etymology sites and books. So as an example, I'll just give one. One of the famous ones, anybody that's clicked around YouTube since 2010 has seen the breakdown of the word government, meaning to control how somebody thinks, or using ment as mind. That's where we get the word mental, and govern is to control. So you're basically controlling how somebody thinks. Another thing that goes hand in hand in that is what do governments do? They dress up people in uniforms. And uniform just means one form, right? One outfit. One way to get people to think the same is to dress them the same, and to get somebody out of regular street clothes. It's been proven, like, psychologically, that people will obey commands from somebody that's not wearing street clothes. Somebody dressed like a scientist with that long white coat and a clipboard, or a uniform that it doesn't even have to be a police uniform, as long as it looks like that. If it looks like a police uniform and somebody's like holding something in their hand, like a walkie-talkie or something, people will follow their commands. It's very strange. I've seen that on these psychological videos and like tests, and people film these, and you can watch them online. You've heard the word talent, and you think of talent as something that somebody does, but the word is actually from, I believe the amount is somewhere like 52 or 53 kilograms of gold or silver is called a talent. So the idea is that if you can do these amazing things, talented, like you have value inside of you or something. It's the idea there. But muse in music is basically the base word of that is muse. So this might be something, organizing notes and rhythm may have come from something like an angel of, the muse. I guess those were angels of creativity and ideas for artistic endeavors. Some of the other water ones that are interesting are merchant. Like if you think of a merchant, you're just thinking of somebody that buys and sells, but mer is the base for mar, or the sea, or water. It's where we get the word mermaid. So a merchant originally was somebody with some kind of meaning of like a sailor, or somebody using water as their, isn't that strange that it's just somebody doing transactions? A merchant is somebody selling. We still use it, merchandise, but the base of that is a water-based word, right? Astronaut, nautical. Some people think that, when they film these things that the astronauts are supposedly doing, that they're basically just scuba divers. There seems to be some legitimacy to that, because there's like air bubbles coming out, and I don't know how many of them almost drowned and things. It's like, just at this point, it's almost like laughable. There's no parallax motion in the videos of like orbiting supposed astronauts, but the word knot comes from nautical. It might be where we get the word for like tying knots and like ropes, because weren't sailors the first ones to do that? So it might be rooted in that. It's interesting how some of the words you wouldn't think have anything to do with each other do have something to do with each other. I mentioned before the uniforms that people wear. If somebody dresses up in a similar way to a police officer, not even necessarily with a badge or a gun or anything, but just holding something and looking like similar to that, people will follow their orders. If you think about the word police, it comes from policy. So they're the ones, they call them law enforcement, but they're also enforcing any policy that superiors consider important. Bass in music is like a foundation, but the word basis is always the foundation of a subject, right? I don't think it's a coincidence that we use the same word bass for the foundation of sound, being the low notes that give structure and power to the sound, is the same word for, like, the root of an argument is the basis of an argument. A lot of these connections seem extremely interesting to me. So the Latin roots of some of these have really interesting meanings too. The more you get bilingual with Spanish and English, the more you see some of these relations. Luna, well, of course it means moon, but the Lu signifies light. So like luz is light, Luna is like a female light. In English, our word for moon is really closely related to the word for month. So in English, it's more of a timing thing. It indicates like the 28-day cycles or 30-day cycles on the calendar, but I think it ends up being closer to 28. But in Spanish, it's the light. So when you put those both together, you end up getting the light of each month, which is just, even the word amazing. I was going to say, to me, that's amazing to kind of put those together. But the word amazing comes from the idea of being amazed. So it's like your mind is like going through all these twists and turns. When you see something amazing, you're just like, wow, that's puts my mind through all these twists and turns. So amaze is really close to the word muse, which would be maybe a fun type of getting lost in all these ideas. So to me, these words just kind of cycle around. Even the word, W-O-R-D, you put an S on the end, is basically swords, right? So you put the S on the front and you have the word sword. Isn't there a couple lines in the Christian Bible where the sword of truth is like is like connected to the words that come out? And then at the end in the book of Revelations, the guy that wrote that book said he saw Jesus with a sword coming out of a double-edged sword coming out of his mouth. So meaning the words can cut like swords, but more of a spiritual sword, right? Like it can operate on the spirit. Getting back to light, so light, the Latin, it seems to be connected with the L and the U together. So or the name Lucifer, the rumor is that comes from light bearer. Luz in Spanish is light. Some people say that the word lucky, which is really close to the word for Luke. So Lucas seems to be connected to that in some way, like light or something to do with that. Some people think that when you're lucky, I don't know, I've had people tell me that I shouldn't say that a long time ago, and it was more of like a hyper-religious person that what she told me was that it means you have like almost like a blessing from Lucifer, and that you're like lucky in this earthly sense, right? You got this like bestowed upon you by Lucifer if you call yourself lucky or if you mention that. I don't know how much of that I believe, but shrug. In this vein of where these words come from is the word tenure. I just can't help but think that tenure comes from the word 10 year. And there's this like funny video on YouTube where one of the guys, Little Richard, is like knocks on the door of the devil and asks, I think he asks him for another 10 years or something. And then there was these shirts on Amazon being sold that said, run like your 10 years is up. And then when somebody looked that up, I think they said that they found that a supposed quote-unquote deal with the devil was supposed to last 10 years. And after 10 years, you have to start paying it back. Which could mean, like some people say, like that's why the Rolling Stones can never retire. All these, like, you see all these quote-unquote bands that have to like play music into their like 70s. They're 70 years old. You can't go on a world tour like that. That's just crazy. They say that like that's part of their deal. They can never quit. They can never retire. They can never rest. That's how they're paying it back, at least so far. I don't know about that. Like, I don't know, like how would you study that? It has to be tenure, right? A tenured position is basically the same word. I don't know. I didn't even look that up. I just, like sonically, I just heard that and I'm like, that's basically the same word. Another one that I came across was wizard, wise ard, which would be an ard being a type of person. Like you say, drunkard, A-R-D, like that signifies like a type of person. Aren't wizards like, aren't you just calling them wise men, wise ards? Algorithm. Didn't Al Gore say that he invented the internet and now the whole thing is run on Al Gore rhythms, like the rhythm of Al Gore? Some people think there's some kind of weird connection like that. Like there's no way that guy invented the internet, right? Universe is, when you get into the numbers, uni is one word. Verse is a group of words. One, like everything came from one word or one phrase, one group of words from God. And that's how the Bible starts. I think that's how most of the, what do you call them, like religious books of the time. Like it just says God spoke everything into existence. Verse is words. So one word, universe, uni, one. History is his, story, monopoly, one ruling over many, mono. So mono, uni, una, all signifies one thing. Money is mono, E at the end of money is really I. So like the one eye watching over everything, similar to monopoly, which is one eye or one thing ruling over everything, at least for the world. I think there's other parts that something can't. Then you get to quad. Quad is interesting because it connects with Spanish, like cuatro. Anytime you have that Q-U-A-R is where we get the word quarter. It's like the 4 parts. Cuarto in Spanish is going to be a room. It's like a 4-sided area. It's like cuadro. Or a really strange one is anything to do with 6. That just kind of goes on and on. I could probably do like a whole episode on the number 6, but it tends to, anytime you look up the etymology of 6, it seems to be interchangeable with something being sectioned, cut up, or sex. If you think about like what sex is, it's like you're taking a part of dad and a part of mom and you join it, which is what the number 6 seems to come from. So they have it listed as divide or to cut or to section, and 6 or sex is where we come up with the word insect, because it's like it seems to be like such a divided up creature. Like there's like these little skinny things, and it's like head, and it's like skinny little thing, it's like body, and it's like skinny little thing, and it's like something else. So it seems to be these two words. I couldn't really find a difference when I looked in like etymology, like even though like the original languages use the same word as sex for both. So it's anything to be cut up or connect, like sectioning off. But what about like hex? So hexagon, hexagram, these seem to have like a negative connotation, like witches putting hexes on people and stuff like that. Why would that word be bad, but the 6s and stuff be okay, you know? Yeah, so I looked up hex, and it's the etymology of it comes from witches. And it actually means a magic spell. So why would it have the connection to the number 6 is what I was wondering. Another one I came across while doing this is broadcast. The word for broadcast seems to be the idea of broadly casting. Some people believe that that comes from witchcraft, and to broadly cast spells is what they say that word came from. If so, that's pretty freaky, I think. There's always that saying that like the months actually use the wrong prefixes at this point in time because the calendar has been changed, or October seems to be, octo is where, you know, music gets the name octave, which is the 8th step, is starting over, which seems to indicate an infinite type of number system or number line, or something starting over. It's no coincidence that the 8 on its side is infinite, but anything that seems to use 8 as a repeating pattern tends to be infinite in its abilities. So an example would be the game of chess. You have 8 squares across, 8 squares across the other side. You have a 64 square board, and it seems to be, once you have that, you can never have an ending to that system. Like you can never run out of games of chess. The other interesting thing is computers these days have basically solved any chess game that has 7 pieces or less. But when you add the 8th chess piece, the computers go into like some infinite type of thing. And people say that there's an end to it, but they've never, there's a big argument because people are like, they'll never get the 8-piece chess game solved with the computer. There seems to, you run out of memory, you can't store it all, like no one's going to go through all that, but people swear like, oh yeah, it's been solved, but it hasn't. They've never come forward and like posted the results anywhere. I don't think they ever will. I think that's the nature of the number 8. When it seems to be a wild card in mathematics, number systems, music. I know there's like a misconception that there's 7 notes in music. There's not. There's 12. And if you count the one that starts over again, an octave starts over again, and you're like on the first step again, but it's slightly different. So would you count that? I don't know. But there's 12 different notes. The 13th starts the pattern over like the 8 does, and there's no way to explain it on radio or whatever this is without studying music. You could probably do a half hour just on that. Some of the ways that this started off was Jordan Maxwell. This is a guy, this is the first time I even heard of anybody talking about where words kind of came from, etymology. He went into how, what I thought was interesting was his big talk. I don't know if you'll be able to find this on YouTube anymore, but he does this big talk about how money is words with water in them, like the word currency, water, current. The word banks hold a river together. Why do we say we put money in a bank? Banks hold the river waters and control the river waters. There was other ones, like when you get in trouble with the law, someone has to bail you out. Like if your boat is sinking, you have to like get a bail the water out of the boat. When you're behind on money, it's called, you're underwater. Brings up that everything is worded in like law and finances as ships. A ship delivers a product. You come from your mother's birth canal. A canal is in water. You even go to a doctor. Some believe like that's where the word doctor came from, like a boat coming into a dock. You'd get delivered to a dock. Like there's so many similarities between like boats, water, women giving birth, us being on a ship. You even get a certificate with your birth. Like when, the captain brings the ship up to the dock, he hands a ship of manifest, which is like where something came from. Like it just manifested. Like here's the manifest. And that's what the birth certificate is. It's like your manifest. Yeah, there's all these words with money where like there's cash flow, liquid assets, the liquidity of money, currency in the river, the water, currency in the flow from the banks holding it in. The banks can't fail, or else what happens then? He brings up all these other things, like the word corporation or corporate comes from corpse, like a dead body. I don't agree with everything he says, but here's a few more. Hours being from Horace, and even in Spanish, they're horas, which is Horas, but you don't pronounce the H in Spanish, so it'd just be horas. But if you look at it, it's really similar to Horace. He brings up cannibal, which is someone that eats people, but he brings it up as coming from Cain and Abel. He talks about where this first came from, and he traces it back to Cain's first city building, like in the Bible, where it says Cain went away and he was the first builder of cities. The other one is authority. Authority comes from author. When you just speak something and that's your story, and that's what's going to happen in your story, that's what an author is in this world. Like whatever they speak up or write, if it affects everybody else and that's what ends up really happening, that's author. That's an author. But what these people are that have quote unquote authority is they have authorship of the world. So whatever they say ends up happening. Whereas if somebody does not have authority, what they say does not matter. Some of you might have come across this in a job or something, where maybe someone like me or people I'm working with have a great idea that would actually help the business, but somebody doesn't want you to have any kind of authority with your words, and nothing that you say comes to action, even if they're hurting the business and even if they're hurting the finances of the company. They would rather hold on to their authority even if it hurts the company that they work for. I've come across that myself. I think many of you have. It's a strange phenomenon, and it seemed to be more of a thing. I don't know. I started noticing that after around the year 2000. It seems like companies used to care more about making money. Now they care more about being able to piss off even their own customers and get away with it. It seems to be the trend things are going. But that's a little off topic, but it does have to do with authority, like whatever they say goes, right? That seems to be more important these days to companies, individuals, quote unquote managers. Even the word manager seems to come from manejar, which is like how you use the word driving in Spanish, driving a car or something like that. But that's even like manager seems to come from that. It comes from like mano, like M-A-N, like control over something. But all right, I'd like to thank everybody for checking out the podcast. RSS Feed is in the description. The music is Downbeat 88. The opening track is called The Dark. The end track is called Moment of Peace. My Patreon is patreon.com/ParadoxWalk. You can also check out the podcast on Pandora, Amazon, Spotify, BitChute. Have a good day. Thanks for listening. Bye.